So you walk into a room, right? You pull out a chair, and you just sit down at this heavy, solid oak table.
Right.
You press your hand against the wood, and it pushes back. It feels, I mean, it feels real, undeniable.
Yeah.
This is about understanding the actual operating system of the reality you inhabit. We are talking about the hidden mechanisms governing literally everything from the expansion of the cosmos right down to how the cells in your own hand know how to heal a paper cut.
Exactly. When you begin to understand the engine of reality, you start to see your own existence, your thoughts, your biology, your physical environment in an entirely different, incredibly connected light.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we have to start by completely demolishing the most basic assumption we all have, which is the space around us. Let's talk about the illusion of space-time.
It's a really great place to start, because traditionally, we just view space as the empty container in which the universe happens.
Like a big empty box.
Right. Newton saw it as a rigid grid. Einstein upgraded it to a flexible fabric that can bend and warp with gravity. But in both cases, space is still there. It's a fundamental thing.
Right. But these papers on what's called holographic spacetime are saying the container itself doesn't exist. They're looking at something called the AD-SCFT correspondence. And this is where my brain starts to melt a little bit. The claim is that the 3D space we think we live in, the bulk geometry, actually emerges from boundary entanglement.
Let's ground this before it gets way too abstract.
Please.
The AD-SCFT correspondence is this mathematical breakthrough originally discovered in the late 90s and has been the hottest topic in theoretical physics ever since. So imagine a soup can.
Okay, a soup can.
The inside of the can, the soup, is what physicists call the bulk. That is the three-dimensional space where gravity exists, where planets orbit, apples fall, all of that. Now look at the label wrapped around the outside of the can. That's the boundary.
Okay, I'm with you.
The math of AD-SCFT proved that you can mathematically describe everything happening inside the 3D soup, complete with gravity, purely by looking at the 2D physics happening on the label. And the label has no gravity at all.
So wait, are you saying the 3D world inside the can is just a projection of the 2D label?
Yes, it's a hologram.
Wow.
But the papers we are looking at today by researchers like Balasubramanian, Czech, and Kanchev, they go a step further. They're explaining how the label projects the soup. And the answer is quantum entanglement.
Entanglement, like Einstein's spooky action at a distance. where two particles are connected so that if you spin one, the other spins instantly no matter how far apart they are.
Exactly. But in these holographic models, space isn't a pre-existing grid where entangled particles just sit. The entanglement actually creates the space. The papers show that patterns of entanglement on that 2D boundary label are encoded in what they call kinematic space.
Okay.
And through a process called entwinement, physicists can mathematically reconstruct the actual physical distances inside the bulk.
Okay, let's test an analogy here. Is it like looking at the underlying code of an open-world video game?
Oh, that's interesting. Let's see.
So if I'm playing a game, the distance between my character and a mountain on the horizon looks like miles of physical space on my screen. But inside the computer's hard drive, there is no physical distance. The character and the mountain are just lines of code. The illusion of distance on the screen is dictated by how strongly those lines of code interact with each other in the processor. Are distance and space in our universe just illusions created by how strongly quantum information is entangled in some lower dimensional hard drive?
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
Let's push that video game analogy even further. In a game, if two characters interact constantly, the processor links their data closely, right?
Right.
In this physics framework, information, specifically entropy, is the actual base level building block. When two quantum systems on the boundary of the universe are highly entangled, the mathematics translates that strong correlation into a short physical distance in the 3D bulk interior.
So if they are weakly entangled,
Then they are physically far apart in the 3D world.
that's crazy.
Space is literally just a metric, a measurement of how correlated quantum information is. Distance is just a measure of entanglement.
That is just, it's staggering. If you remove the entanglement, you literally delete the space between things.
Yeah. And what's fascinating here is how powerful this math is actually becoming. It goes deeper than just measuring distance. The math allows physicists to reconstruct hidden regions of space, things they call entanglement shadows.
Shadows.
Yeah, by looking at the internal or gauge degrees of freedom on the boundary label, they can build the geometric shape of regions inside the can that would otherwise be entirely inaccessible to an observer.
Wait. How do they do that mechanically? How does looking at a flat 2D surface let you build a hidden 3D cavern?
Well, according to Kanchev's work in the stack, you can actually engineer these entangled boundary states using mathematical tools called Schmidt-like expansions.
Okay, what is a Schmidt expansion?
Think of it as a way to untangle a complex knot of information into its simplest paired-up components. By tweaking the coefficients, the dials and knobs, essentially of how those pairs are entangled on the boundary, you can reconstruct a spacetime with a specifically chosen topology in the bulk.
So, hypothetically, if you had some kind of godlike computer, you could custom build the shape of a universe, like decide whether it has wormholes or black holes or how many dimensions it folds into, just by tweaking how the information on its boundary is entangled.
Precisely. You are basically programming the geometry.
Yeah.
Now, historically, a lot of this was confined to a very specific hypothetical type of universe called anti-de Sitter space. That's the ADS in EDA-CFT. It's a universe with negative curvature, kind of shaped like a saddle.
Which our universe is not. Our universe is expanding and relatively flat.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But recent work, like the 2023 paper by Busso and Pennington that we have here, is breaking out of that hypothetical space. They are generalizing these concepts, what they call entanglement wedges and holograms, beyond ADS space.
You're trying to apply it to our real universe.
Yes. They're aggressively trying to apply these holographic rules to actual real-world cosmological models. The takeaway is profound. Information and geometry are no longer separate fields of study. They are becoming completely interchangeable concepts.
Okay, so if the container space itself is just an emergent hologram built out of entangled quantum information, what about the stuff inside the space?
The matter.
Right, because if the room isn't real, the furniture in the room probably isn't what we think it is either. If we don't have space, how do particles even move or interact?
And this brings us to a massive crisis in modern physics. And transitioning to our second framework, the amplitude and emergent rules. We are moving from the geometry of space to the geometry of particle interactions.
Let's set the stage for why this is such a big deal. Traditionally, if a physicist wants to calculate how particles interact, say, we put two subatomic particles in the Large Hadron Collider, smash them together at near light speed, and we want to know the probability that three specific new particles will fly out. They use quantum field theory, or QFT.
And calculating those probabilities, which are called scattering amplitudes, is an incredibly arduous, messy process.
Right. You have to use Feynman diagrams. And for anyone who hasn't seen one, a Feynman diagram looks a bit like a stick figure drawing of particles bumping into each other.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
But to get an accurate probability, you can't just draw the most obvious path. Quantum mechanics says particles take all possible paths. So you have to draw diagrams where the particles bump once, then diagrams where they bump twice, then diagrams where ghost particles pop into existence, spin around, and vanish.
Virtual particles forming loops.
Yes. And the math for this snowballs, right? To calculate a relatively simple interaction between, say, 2 gluons turning into 4 gluons, you have to draw hundreds of diagrams, calculate tens of thousands of terms, and the math goes on for literally hundreds of pages.
It is a total nightmare. It's highly complex, extraordinarily prone to errors, and here is the crucial flaw. It relies heavily on tracking what happens at specific points in space and time. It assumes a rigid space-time grid that we just established might not even exist.
Right, so theoretical physicists are drowning in hundreds of pages of algebra, trying to track ghost particles in a space-time grid that is probably a hologram. Enter Nima Arkani Hamed and the concept of positive geometry.
What's fascinating here is how researchers like Arkani Hamed and his collaborator Jaroslav Trenka have completely sidestepped that traditional mess. They looked at those hundreds of pages of Feynman diagram math, and they realized that when you finally add all the terms together, thousands of them miraculously cancel each other out.
Wait, really?
Yes, a 200-page equation collapses into a single, elegant one-line formula.
Which tells you the universe isn't actually doing 200 pages of math. Human physicists were just using the wrong language.
Exactly. They discovered that you can calculate these scattering amplitudes, not by tracking imaginary particles through space-time, but by calculating the volume of specific, highly abstract geometric objects.
Volume of a shape.
Yes, the canonical differential form, which you can loosely think of as calculating the hypervolume of a multifaceted gemstone. And these gemstones live in abstract, multi-dimensional mathematical spaces completely outside of space and time.
And these objects have amazing names. The amplituhedron, the icosahedron, Stokes polytopes. I want to make sure the listener can visualize this. When you say Stokes polytope, what are we actually looking at conceptually?
Imagine a gemstone with dozens of different flat facets, like a beautifully cut diamond. The amplituhedron and Stokes polytopes are like higher dimensional versions of that diamond. In traditional physics, you track particles through time. In positive geometry, you simply look at the faces of this jewel. Each facet of the geometry perfectly corresponds to a specific way the particles could interact. The sheer volume of the jewel itself gives you the exact probability of the particle collision.
Okay, hold on. You're telling me that a static geometric shape, a multi-dimensional pyramid floating in some imaginary math space, is somehow dictating the exact probability of 2 real-world particles colliding in a particle accelerator in Switzerland?
Yes.
How does a shape have anything to do with probability?
That is the multi-million-dollar question, and it represents the crucial paradigm shift in these positive geometries. It's about what they eliminate from the starting equations. For nearly a century, the 2 most sacred pillars of quantum physics have been locality and unitarity.
Okay, let's define those. Locality is the idea that things only affect what's immediately next to them. A particle has to be at a specific localized point in space and time to bump into another particle?
Correct. And unitarity is the rule that probabilities must be preserved. The sum of all probabilities of all possible outcomes of an event was always equal exactly 1.
Right. If you roll a 6-sided die, the chance of getting a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 adds up to 100%. You can't have a 120% chance of an event happening.
Exactly. Now, in traditional Feynman physics, you have to forcefully bake locality and unitarity into your equations from the very beginning. They're fundamental inputs. If your math violates them, your math is wrong.
Makes sense.
But here's the mind-bending part. In the amplituhedron and these other positive geometries, locality and unitarity are entirely absent. They are not fundamental inputs. Space, time, and probability are not coded into the shape.
Then how does it work? How do we get the right answers?
They emerge purely as a consequence of the shape's positivity.
What does that mean?
The sharp boundaries, the corners, the factorization structures of the geometry itself naturally produce answers that are perfectly local and unitary. The geometry acts as a theory at infinity, living completely outside of our bulk spacetime, calculating the answers to particle collisions without ever knowing what spacetime or probability even are.
So the particles in my body right now, the fact that they don't just phase through each other, the fact that they obey the laws of physics, That's not because they are following local rules in space-time, it's because they are the physical shadows of some perfect hyperdimensional geometry.
That is exactly the implication. And it's not just one niche theory. The research in our stack spans several different areas of quantum field theory. For instance, there is an object called the kinematic associhedron.
It's associhedron.
Yeah. This specific geometric object perfectly describes the scattering amplitudes for a theoretical framework called bi-adjoint phi-cubed theory, which basically models how forces are mediated. Then you have the Stokes polytopes, which we mentioned, providing the positive geometry for phi to the fourth interactions, basically modeling the simplest type of scalar particle collisions.
And the big one is the amplituhedron itself.
Yes, the momentum amplituhedron calculates the amplitudes for planar N4 supersymmetric Yang-Mills theory.
Say that 5 times fast.
Right. It is a mouthful, but it is essentially a mathematically perfected, highly symmetrical version of the theory that describes the strong nuclear force in our real world. The math is incredibly robust.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because we need to take a breath and look at the picture we're painting. We have one set of theories, add SCFT and holography, saying the space we walk around in is an illusion built by the entanglement of quantum information.
All right.
We have another set of theories, positive geometry, saying the particles that make up our bodies are just the emergent shadows of hyperdimensional shapes, calculating probabilities completely outside of time.
It is a radical deconstruction of reality.
But what is driving it?
What do you mean?
Well, if the universe isn't a mechanical clockwork made of physical gears, and if it's just geometry and information, what pushes the system to actually do anything? Why does the universe evolve? Why do galaxies spin? And why do biological cells divide? Geometry is static, so what is the engine?
That is the perfect question. If geometry builds space, and geometry dictates particle interactions, what is the dynamic engine driving the evolution of the system? To answer that, we turn to the third major concept in our stack, the free energy principle, or the FEP, and the mechanics of active inference.
The free energy principle. Now, this is heavily championed by Carl Friston, who is an absolute legend in neuroscience. But the papers we have take his work on the brain and basically apply it to literally everything.
They do. The core idea of the FEP is that any system that exists, meaning any system that resists the natural tendency toward entropy and chaos, must self-organize.
Okay.
Whether it's a living cell, a human brain, or a galaxy, if it maintains a structure, it does so by minimizing a variational free energy bound on surprise.
Okay, let's unpack surprise, because if we're talking about galaxies and subatomic particles, we obviously don't mean jumping out from behind a door with a birthday cake.
No. In information theory, surprise is basically prediction error. It's the difference between what a system expects to encounter and what it actually encounters. The universe, according to the FEP, operates on what's called Bayesian self-evidencing dynamics.
Bayesian meaning updating your beliefs based on new probabilities.
Exactly. Systems are constantly trying to predict their environment. They maintain an internal model of the world outside of them. And here's the active part. They take actions to fulfill their own predictions, thereby avoiding chaotic, unpredictable states that would ultimately destroy them.
Let's elevate this with an analogy. A lot of people explain this using human body temperature, but I think that's too simple. Let's look at a flock of starlings. A murmuration.
Oh yeah.
Thousands of birds flying in those incredible swooping shapes without ever crashing into each other.
A beautiful example of self-organization.
Right. So under the FEP, a single bird isn't running complex calculus to map the whole flock. That bird's internal model expects two things. It expects to not experience the aerodynamic drag of flying alone, and it expects to not experience the sudden, terrifying surprise of a falcon diving into its personal space.
Right.
So the bird constantly takes action, adjusting its speed and trajectory based on the sensory input of the birds immediately next to it to minimize aerodynamic surprise and predator surprise.
Perfect. The bird is engaged in active inference. It changes its environment by moving to match its internal prediction of safety. It minimizes its free energy. Now, what the sources we're looking at do, specifically a groundbreaking paper by Fields, Friston, Glazebrook, and Levin, is take this exact principle and push it all the way down to the quantum foundation we were just discussing.
They outline a quantum version of the free energy principle.
Yes, they place the FEP in a completely space-time-free, scale-free quantum information setting. They treat quantum interactions not as physical bumps, but as information exchanges where quantum states are updating their beliefs about their environment. And they prove mathematically that minimizing variational free energy in this informational setting is asymptotically equivalent to the principle of unitarity in generic quantum systems.
Wait, unitarity, the exact same principle we just talked about emerging from the amplituhedron, the conservation of probability.
Precisely. The preservation of information. The math of a quantum system maintaining its state and the math of an informational system minimizing prediction error turn out to be deeply, fundamentally aligned.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I need to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
I don't want to make it sound like the physics community has just accepted this as a closed case. The sources explicitly highlight a lot of skepticism. Critics point out that claiming the FEP is a theory of everything is incredibly bold, and currently it is largely untested empirically at the quantum scale.
It's vital to encourage critical thinking here.
Yeah, some critics argue that the FEP is so broad that it might just be a tautology. Like, they argue, of course things that exist tend to minimize the states that would cause them to not exist. If they didn't, they wouldn't exist for us to observe them. It's basically survivorship bias masquerading as a physical law.
This raises a very fair point, and the listener shouldn't view the free energy principle as settled physical dogma on par with the laws of thermodynamics. It is a highly powerful interpretive lens. It provides a variational, information-theoretic account of how dynamics self-organize. But directly bridging the math of Bayesian prediction to the hard, empirical measurements of subatomic particles in a collider, that is still very much a theoretical work in progress. It's a compelling narrative, but the bridge is absolutely under construction.
Okay, so let's pause and look at the board, because we've built quite the mind map. We have holographic spacetime building geometry out of entanglement. We have the amplituhedron calculating particle interactions from pure positive geometry. And we have the free energy principle, arguing that systems evolve by minimizing informational surprise.
3 monumental frameworks.
So the natural question is, do they connect? Are they all secretly talking about the exact same underlying mechanism?
That leads us perfectly into the critical analysis in the paper titled Interfaces of Independence. And the blunt, short answer to whether they formally connect mathematically right now is no.
Well, that is a little heartbreaking.
I know. The current mainstream research treats them as entirely separate programs. There is no direct, peer-reviewed mathematical equation that flawlessly links an amplituhedron to a Bayesian brain. However, the paper points out that they share profound structural analogies, specifically around how they use the concept of boundaries and interfaces.
Right, because if you want to define a thing in the universe, you have to draw a boundary around it to separate it from everything else. The Interfaces of Independence paper looks specifically at comparing the boundaries in biology and cognition with the boundaries in quantum field theory.
Yes, let's break that down. In the free energy principle, the boundary has a very specific name: a Markov blanket.
A Markov blanket.
Yes, a Markov blanket is a statistical concept. Imagine a boundary that separates the internal states of a system from the external states of the environment. It mediates the interactions between the inside and the outside via 2 channels: sensory states, which receive input from the outside, and active states, which output action to the outside.
The easiest example is probably the membrane of a biological cell, right? The nucleus is the internal state, the blood plasma outside is the external state. The cell wall is the Markov blanket.
Exactly. Or the surface of a brain.
Yeah.
Or the atmosphere of a planet. The key mathematical feature of a Markov blanket is that it creates what statisticians call conditional independence.
And what does that mean in plain English?
It means the internal states are completely blind to the external states, except for the information that passes through the blanket.
Okay.
The inside only knows what the blanket tells it. This induces an information geometry where the internal states have to essentially parameterize or guess what's happening in the external world based solely on the shadows flickering on the blanket.
So the cell doesn't really know there is blood plasma outside. It just knows its sensory receptors are being stimulated in a certain way, and it infers the rest.
Right.
Okay, so that's the statistical boundary in active inference. Now, how does that compare to the boundaries in the amplituhedron and positive geometries?
In scattering amplitudes, positive geometries also rely entirely on boundaries. But these are geometric boundaries of multidimensional shapes, polytopes or varieties living in auxiliary mathematical spaces, like Grassmannians. We mentioned earlier that the physical rules of locality and unitarity are not baked into the math, they emerge.
Yeah.
They are direct consequences of the boundary structure and the factorization properties of the geometry itself. The boundary of the shape dictates the allowed physics.
Okay, I have to push back here. I am calling foul. Yeah, if one of these boundaries, the Markov blanket, operates in biology and cognition, dealing with the messy stochastic probabilities of living cells trying to survive, and the other boundary, the positive geometry, operates in purely abstract math, calculating the exact trajectories of subatomic particles, aren't we just comparing apples and spaceships? I mean, just because biologists use the word boundary and particle physicists use the word boundary doesn't mean they're remotely related.
That is exactly the sober warning the paper delivers.
Yeah.
Right now, the connection is purely analogical. They are conceptual cousins, not identical twins. None of the papers on the amplituhedron mention Markov blankets, and none of the papers on the free energy principle discuss scattering amplitudes or Grassmannians.
Right.
They both utilize boundary structures to define their systems and control allowed interactions, but they do so in entirely different mathematical languages and physical settings. As of today, no one has derived an amplituhedron from a free energy equation or successfully mapped active inference onto the entanglement wedges of a holographic spacetime.
But what if we could bridge them? What if there is a layer of reality so incredibly fundamental that subatomic scattering matrices, the illusion of 3D space, and the biological cells in your heart are literally just different software programs running on the exact same underlying operating system?
Now we are crossing the frontier. Our final source is a highly speculative, incredibly ambitious synthesis document that attempts to do exactly that. It's a manuscript outlining what it calls the computational universe.
This is where we leave the established, peer-reviewed shores and sail into deep speculative waters, and I absolutely love it. The foundational layer of this computational model introduces a concept known as the Roolead.
The Roolead. It's a term primarily coined by Stephen Wolfram. The concept is staggering.
It sounds like an epic Greek poem. You know, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Roolead.
In a mathematical sense, it is an epic. The Roolead is defined as the ultimate abstract space of all possible computational rules and all their infinite evolutions. It is the absolute limit of computation. Imagine a space that contains every possible algorithm, every possible program running every possible input.
It's basically the Library of Babel, but for physics.
Exactly. The idea here is that our specific universe wasn't just spoken into existence from nothing with a rigid set of rules. Instead, our universe is just one specific trajectory unfolding within this vast, infinite Roolead.
And the key concept they highlight here is computational irreducibility. Let's unpack that because it's crucial. Computational irreducibility essentially means there are no shortcuts in the math. You can't just skip ahead to the end of the book.
A great way to visualize this is weather forecasting.
Okay.
If you want to perfectly predict the weather 10 years from now, down to the exact position of every single raindrop, you can't just use a simple formula. The system is too complex, too chaotic. The only way to know exactly what the weather will be in 10 years is to build a perfect atom-for-atom simulation of the Earth and let it run for 10 years. The computation is irreducible. You have to run the code step by step to see what happens.
You can't predict the future state of the universe without letting the universe compute itself to that state.
Precisely. The universe is a computer, and its current state is the output of all its previous states.
And what absolutely blows my mind about this synthesis is what it means for the so-called laws of physics. Because if the universe is fundamentally computational, unfolding from the Roolead, then things like gravity or the speed of light or electromagnetism, they aren't fundamental axioms. They aren't handed down on stone tablets. They are emergent algorithms.
What's fascinating here is how this framework naturally absorbs the math we talked about earlier. In this computational model, mathematical objects like twistors and spinors are introduced.
These are concepts championed by Roger Penrose, right?
Yes. Twistors and spinors are highly abstract mathematical languages. In standard physics, we use vectors to map 3D space. But in the computational universe, twistors and spinors are considered the more fundamental machine code. They encode the intrinsic properties of particles, like quantum spin, and they relate directly to the emergent structure of space-time we discussed in holography. In this view, a twistor isn't just a math trick. It's a fundamental line of code in the Roolead.
Okay, so we have the Roolead, the infinite space of all possible codes. We have our universe, computationally grinding through one specific set of code, using twistors as the language. But again, we return to the engine problem.
Right.
Why does our universe choose the code it chooses? Out of infinite possibilities in the Roolead, why do we have stable gravity and chemistry?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the free energy principle slots in perfectly as the cosmic organizational drive. In a computational universe constantly updating its states, systems naturally evolve to minimize surprise. They fall into stable, predictable, and informationally efficient patterns.
Because chaos requires too much energy to process.
Exactly. The universe is essentially learning how to compute itself more efficiently. It gravitates toward algorithms that produce stable, predictable outcomes.
I want to take a second and remind you, the listener, of what this actually means for you, because it's easy to get lost in twisters and ruliads. This means the laws of gravity that keep you tethered to the floor right now, or the quantum mechanics that allow the microchips in your phone to work. It's not just dead, mechanical math. Gravity is the universe running a highly efficient, heavily selected piece of software to avoid the surprise of matter flying apart. You are living inside a learning algorithm.
Which brings us to one of the most speculative but arguably most profound mechanisms proposed in this synthesis document. It addresses a massive problem with the idea of a computing universe.
Oh man, this is my absolute favorite part. The problem of energy. We established that the universe is computationally irreducible. It has to run the code step by step to know the answer. But computation takes energy. It takes resources. If the universe is constantly computing the folding of every protein in the orbit of every moon, it should exhaust itself.
Right. So the synthesis asks, does the universe really have to discover solutions from scratch every single time? When a star forms in one galaxy, and a million years later another star forms in a different galaxy, does the universe have to recompute the entire process of nuclear fusion from the ground up?
And the proposed answer to save energy is morphic fields. But I want to be very careful here, because they redefine them. Morphic fields are usually associated with a kind of New Age mysticism like a magical aura. But this document frames them strictly as computational cache memory.
Think about your web browser. When you visit a massive, complex website for the first time, your computer has to download all the high-res images, the formatting scripts, the videos. It takes time.
Yeah.
But the next day, when you visit that same site, it loads instantly. Why? Because your browser saved a copy in its cache memory.
It doesn't recalculate the whole site, it just pulls the saved data.
Exactly. The hypothesis here is that the universe accesses a non-local cache of previously successful FEP-aligned patterns. These morphic fields act as a cosmic repository. When a system, say, a massive cloud of hydrogen gas trying to collapse into a stable star, or a complex chain of amino acids trying to fold into a stable protein, when it hits upon a highly efficient computational path that minimizes free energy, that mathematical solution is stored in the cache.
And this gets reinforced via what the paper calls multimodality testing, which is just a brilliant concept. It means the universe is looking for universal efficiency. If a specific mathematical algorithm is highly efficient for organizing the spiral arms of a galaxy, and that exact same mathematical algorithm turns out to be highly efficient for organizing the spiraling weather patterns of a hurricane, or the spiral of a nautilus shell, the universe reinforces that pattern in the cache. It becomes a preferred template.
The physical manifestation of this, the document speculates, would be attractor states in the underlying quantum fields. These aren't just abstract ideas floating in the ether. They would physically bias the probability of certain physical interactions occurring. The universe is structurally biased toward pre-tested, efficient pathways.
So things in nature look similar, like veins in a leaf looking like tributaries of a river, not just because of physical constraints, but because the universe is literally copy-pasting code from its cache memory.
Yes. And if we scale this concept up to its absolute maximum, we arrive at cosmic inheritance. The text ties this non-local memory directly to Sir Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology, or CCC.
We have to talk about CCC because it is one of the most beautiful cosmological theories out there. Most people know the Big Bang Theory. The universe started from a single point, expanded, and will eventually freeze out. Penrose's theory suggests that our universe is just one in a potentially infinite sequence of universes, which he calls eons.
In CCC, a universe extends for trillions of years. Eventually, all the black holes evaporate, all the matter decays into radiation, and the universe becomes an infinite, cold soup of photons. But here's the trick. Photons do not experience time or distance. In a universe made only of light, scale loses all meaning.
Right.
Infinite expansion mathematically becomes indistinguishable from an infinitely dense point. The end of one universe mathematically becomes the exact starting conditions for a new Big Bang.
A cycle of universes, born from the ashes of the last. But the crucial point the synthesis makes is that in this computational model, the new universe doesn't start from a blank slate. When the new eon bangs into existence, it inherits the morphic cache from the previous universe.
It provides a mechanism for information to be inherited across cosmic scales. The universe is accumulating memory across eons. It's getting better at being a universe.
Right.
And interestingly, Penrose and his colleagues have pointed to actual physical data, specifically anomalies in the cosmic microwave background radiation, which is the afterglow of the Big Bang.
Right. They look at these things called Hawking points, or these massive, unexplained concentric rings of slightly varying temperature in the deep space radiation.
Penrose suggests these rings could be the gravitational shock waves of supermassive black holes colliding in the previous universe. The synthesis document takes it a step further. What if those anomalies are the physical imprints of inherited informational structures?
It's like finding the browser history of the previous universe burned into the background radiation of space. It's staggering. We're talking about cosmic evolution across trillions of years. But we promised at the beginning of this deep dive to take this from the cosmos right down to your cells. So let's zoom all the way back in. Let's look at biology.
We bring this massive cosmic scale theory down to a microscopic, tangible scale by looking at the incredible research of biologist Michael Levin at Tufts University. Levin's work focuses on bioelectricity and what he calls basal cognition.
This is where the free energy principle, Markov blankets, and morphic fields suddenly become very, very literal and physical.
Levin's research demonstrates that information processing is a nested hierarchy. We intuitively think of the brain with its billions of neurons as the only thing in the body that computes or thinks. But Levin's laboratory shows that individual cells, tissues, and whole organs are solving complex geometric and functional problems constantly, completely independent of the brain. They form a collective intelligence.
Let's give the listener the famous example, the planarian flatworm. You can take this worm, cut its head off, and the tail will grow a completely new head, complete with a brain. But it gets crazier. If you cut the worm into tiny pieces, every single piece knows exactly how to regrow the entire rest of the body. How? How does a tail cell know it needs to build an eye?
Historically, biologists would say it's all in the DNA. But DNA is just a recipe for proteins. It doesn't contain a blueprint for a 3D shape. DNA doesn't know what an eye is.
Right. If you cut off a salamander's arm, it grows exactly the right amount of bone, muscle, and skin, and then it stops. How does it know when to stop? The cells are communicating. They have an internal geometric model of what the salamander is supposed to look like. And when an arm is missing, that creates massive prediction error. The cells take action, they divide, and build tissue to minimize the surprise of a missing limb. That is Bayesian active inference happening on a cellular level.
And here is the mind-blowing physical connection Levin discovered. This cellular communication, this collective memory of the body's shape, happens via bioelectrical networks.
It's not chemical, it's electrical.
Yes. The electrical voltage states of the cell membranes literally dictate how genes are expressed and how bodies are built. Levin has experimentally altered the bioelectric maps in flatworms to make them grow two heads, or grow heads belonging to completely different species of worms without altering their DNA at all. He just changed the software.
So the bioelectric network is the software, and the DNA is just the hardware producing the building materials.
And the synthesis document links this perfectly. It suggests that these bioelectrical networks and living tissue could be the actual physical interface for the cache morphic fields at a biological level.
Okay, let's make sure that lands. The synthesis is suggesting that the exact same non-local cache memory mechanism that biases quantum fields to form stable particle structures might be interfacing directly with the bioelectrical networks in biological tissue to guide morphogenesis, the building of the body, and regeneration.
It emphasizes a breathtaking, scale-invariant unity to nature. The mathematical principles of adaptive information processing, minimizing free energy, predicting the environment, referencing cache solutions are reused across vastly different domains. From the cosmological laws governing space-time holography, down to the geometric rules of particle scattering in an apodahedron, right down to the bioelectric cellular organization trying to heal the tissue in your own body.
It is the exact same underlying operating system, just running different applications at different scales.
That is the core argument of the computational universe.
Now, there is a historical pattern we see constantly on this show. Whenever science pushes right up to the very edge of understanding reality, when the math gets so advanced it almost breaks. We often find that philosophy, and sometimes ancient mysticism, have been waiting there for a long time.
It's a fascinating metaphorical layer to add to the physics. The synthesis document explicitly points out that humanity might have intuited this basic architecture of reality centuries before the mathematics of quantum information theory caught up. Specifically, it references a profound concept from 16th century Lurianic Kabbalah called Tzimtzum.
Let's explore that metaphor. In Lurianic Kabbalah, there is the concept of the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof represents the infinite, boundless, undifferentiated reality of the divine. It is everything, everywhere, all at once. Infinite potential. But this creates a logical paradox. If the divine is infinite and completely fills all of existence, how can a finite, specific physical world possibly exist? There's no room for it. A specific chair or specific planet cannot exist if space is already completely filled with infinite potential.
The answer proposed in the mystical tradition is Tzimtzum, which translates roughly to contraction or withdrawal. The metaphor is that the infinite divine conceptually contracts itself, withdrawing its infinite nature to create a conceptual void, a dark, empty space. And into this newly created, restricted space, a specific, finite, rule-bound reality can emerge and unfold.
And the parallel here between 16th century mysticism and 21st century quantum computation is just stunning, because mathematically, that is exactly what the Ruliad is.
It is a perfect structural mirror. The Ruliad is the abstract, infinite space of all possible computational rules. It is computational infinity. It is the mathematical Ein Sof. But for our specific universe to exist with its specific laws of gravity, its specific speed of light, and its specific quantum mechanics, there has to be a contraction, a restriction.
The infinite potential of the Ruliad must undergo a mathematical contraction by selecting a highly specific set of algorithms, a specific computational path. It restricts the infinite down to the finite.
It creates the computational space for our specific universe to compute its existence. The metaphorical symmetry is profound. Both frameworks describe a reality where the tangible, finite world we experience emerges only through a purposeful restriction of an underlying infinite potential.
So, what does this all mean? We've covered an incredible, almost overwhelming amount of ground today. Let's try to distill this journey, because we promised to break down reality and rebuild it.
We started by looking at space and time, and we found that the 3D space we walk around in might just be a holographic projection, built fundamentally by the entanglement of quantum information on a lower dimensional boundary.
Then we looked at matter. We saw that the fundamental particles making up our bodies and the probabilities of how they interact aren't tiny billiard balls bouncing around in that space. They are the emergent shadows of hyperdimensional shapes, like the amplituhedron, where physical laws are just consequences of pure geometry.
And driving all of this static geometry is an engine of self-organization. Systems from the smallest subatomic particles to the cells in a salamander to the largest galaxies are constantly running Bayesian active inference to minimize informational surprise, avoiding chaos, governed by the free energy principle.
And wrapping all of this together is the framework of the computational universe, a system where our reality is just one specific trajectory of code. A universe that doesn't compute blindly, but learns. It caches its successful, efficient patterns into a cosmic, morphic memory, inheriting stability from universes that came before, and running that very same efficient code right down into the bioelectrical networks of our own biology.
It fundamentally changes the paradigm of existence.
It really does. It changes how you look at the solid oak table we started with, and it changes how you look at your own hand resting on it.
And this is exactly why it matters to the listener. Knowledge is most valuable when understood and integrated into your worldview. Now, obviously, you can't wake up tomorrow and consciously decide to alter the scattering amplitudes of an amplituhedron. You can't consciously rewrite the quantum entanglement that projects the space in your living room.
I mean, I've tried. It mostly just results in a headache.
But understanding that you are part of a massive learning nested intelligence that changes how you view your place in reality. You are not a random accident of blind dead mechanics in a cold universe. You are an active, computationally irreducible node in a system that is inherently driven to find stability, meaning, and structure. The exact same fundamental rules of active inference that allow a galaxy to form are the rules your cellular bioelectricity uses to heal a cut. You are deeply, mathematically, and computationally integrated into the fabric of it all.
Which brings me to one final thought I want to leave you with, something to chew on after this deep dive ends. If the universe is fundamentally a computational system that caches successful patterns to save energy, and your own biology is part of that network, using bioelectric memories to survive and form habits are your daily thoughts, your routines, your physical habits, just the universe trying to write a more efficient line of code through you. And if your choices are feeding back into the morphic cache of reality, what kind of code are you choosing to write today?